Hello everyone. Welcome to the introductory webinar of the WikiContest Youth in IG. In today's session, we will first explain the ideas behind the Youth Observatory and this project. We will then explain the competition rules. And last but not least, we will call on two guests from the Wikimedia Foundation, Alex and Melissa, to explain how to edit Wikipedia and Wikidata. First of all, let us introduce ourselves. I'm Pedro de Perdigão Lana, head of the Editorial Commission of the Youth Observatory. And with me, we have other members from the Youth Observatory, Juliana, Eileen, and Lily Botse, who will say a few words to introduce herself and talk a bit of the history of the Youth Observatory and what we pretend with this project. Lily, you have the floor.
Right. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world they are listening to us. So about this project, as some of you know, the Youth Observatory is a special interest group, or SIG, as we say, of the Internet Society, and we focus on youth participation. We are all about promoting an open and accessible internet and increasing the influence and opportunities of young people in the ecosystem of the internet governance, since we believe that we, who are usually the most engaged demographics in the cyberspace, should not be seen as passive actors, especially because we are the very first generation of active users of the internet who will not grow up just using it, but also contributing to building its core. So these aims include active participation in different projects related to strengthening the internet as a tool to promote human rights and knowledge around the globe, simulating the dialogue between people from different cultures and backgrounds, and shrinking the digital divide. To achieve this, we follow the internet's way of networking, partnering up with individuals and organizations who share the same views and are after similar objectives. The internet owes its success not only to technology, but to the way it operates and evolves. The online environment empowers individuals to connect, to speak, to innovate, to share, to learn, and organize, providing an excellent framework to potentially use this network as a force for good. To make sure we can keep using it this way, we need to recognize and protect its critical properties. We would like to highlight two of those properties. The first one is the open architecture of interoperable and reusable building blocks. The second is its decentralized management. While these are usually remembered when we are talking about the technical aspects of the internet, we can also see their concrete manifestation in Wikipedia and other platforms maintained by the Wikimedia Foundation. As a global community, many people volunteer with their time and resources for the common good, creating a free, accessible, and easy to understand database encompassing an incredible amount of human knowledge. So welcome to today's session. I'll give the floor back to Pedro to continue.
Yeah, the idea behind the WikiContest is that the younger generations are becoming more and more passive in their relationship with these projects that Wikimedia funds or provides the engagement necessary. And these projects require a collective and ongoing construction, so it's not useful just to consume the knowledge without improving it in a similar rhythm. This is where the WikiContest and we come in, trying to engage young people in an essential activity to maintain the internet as a widely recognized and a very positive asset for humanity as a whole. With this, we make youth participation in the internet more diversified and relevant, without centering so much in the traditional internet governance spaces, such as the regional or global forums. Without further delay, we can proceed to a short review on the rules. I'll just share my screen here so you all can accompany me. Just a second. Oh, wrong one. Here we go. Everyone can see it? Okay. So the first thing about the rules is that we are centering on two platforms from Wikimedia. Wikipedia, that is the one most of us know, and Wikidata, that is a simpler one to edit it's a little bit more friendly when we're talking about the community, what you need to know to make those edits, to add something there. So we centered on those two platforms, and those two will be counted to contribute as contributions on the contest. We used the most ample, the most abundant definition of youth in the internet governance. So people between 18 and 35 years will participate. If you are younger, we will also consider it, but for some restrictions, we are thinking we usually start at 18, but if you're 17 or 16, you can participate as well, and we will see to include you in the prizes. You can participate even if you are not into this range of age, but the only way you can receive prizes is if you are between 18 and 35 years. 18 and 35 years, and we will try to consider if you are 16 or 17. You don't need to know about internet governance, but mainly to edit Wikipedia, you need to have good sources and understand what you're talking about. So it's highly recommended that participants with little experience do some previous research and connect with the topic before the competition begins. We will show some sources at the end of these rules. To participate, everyone needs to create an Wikimedia account or a separate account for both Wikipedia and Wikidata, and register at our specific form that will remain open during the whole duration of the contest. Participants must also register their contributions connecting themselves to our dashboard. It's a platform created by Wikimedia to this kind of contest, to editathons as well. There is a guide that we linked here on how to use it correctly. We will also go back to it at the end of the explanation. When registering yourself, you can also correct this after registering, sending us an email. You need to specify and clarify your username so we can identify who is the one contributing, and after that we can deliver the prize correctly. For those that do not speak English, cannot understand English easily, you can use the other guides in Spanish, Portuguese, or French. There are actually a lot of guides in the internet on how to use Wikipedia, on how to use Wikidata. So you don't need actually to understand this webinar fluently to know how to do this, but it's it's a good thing to have some direct information from Alex and from Elisa. And as an evaluation criteria, we are expecting those that are eliminatory and classificatory criteria. To be considered to receive the prizes, you need to participate in all expected Wikimedia projects. You need to comply to Wikimedia standards, especially the ones concerning human rights and non-discriminatory content. You need to have novelty and creativity on at least one of the produced contents. You should know, however, that this is not some, you should not do your own primary source research or draw your own conclusions when making our contributions. This is not what Wikipedia is about. It's not like the academia to publish your own ideas. I believe Alex and Melissa will explain it a little better afterwards. You should make at least one translation of, and this is especially for the Spanish, French, and Portuguese participants, of another article to your own language. You should improve an existing article, or in the case of Wikidata, go on an existing space and add some info there. Your contributions should also be careful with what kind of information you are getting into these platforms. You cannot just get any source and add this to the WikiContest. And your contributions should all be connected with an internet governance subject. There is a wide array of options to go after rights cryptography, fragmentation of the internet, legal aspects of the internet. There are a lot of subjects you can approach, but you should do something related to internet governance. You should not contribute just with the bare minimum. This won't be helpful if you want to be successful and get the first, second, and third place in the contest. And by the same logic, you shouldn't, even if it's not explicitly stated in the rules, you should not do some common sense infractions such as plagiarism, and how could I put it? Because plagiarism in Wikipedia, I believe Alex will also say, it's not just copying word by word of what is in another person's text, a third party's text. So please read the rules, read the guides, and see how to edit meaningfully. After the evaluation, the winners will be contacted by the Youth Observatory board. They will choose what kind of gift card they will receive, and they have a deadline of 1 week after the winners are announced to claim their prize, and another week to provide the means to receive the award. For example, the email to receive the gift card that we are buying for them. If participants, if these winners do not contact us through during this deadline, the money will be returned to the Wikimedia Foundation. Applications will be accepted during the whole duration of the contest. Valid contributions can be made from 1 minute after the start of the day on May 17th, and which is tomorrow. And the contest will go on until the midnight of May 28th. That is Friday, or that means that you have 2 weeks to make contributions. Then judges will have another 2 weeks, a little bit more than that, to evaluate and decide the winners. And after that, we will announce the winners and communicate them through email and through our blog and social media. If you have any doubts, you can ask us at the email that is contacting you, info@youthsig.org, or you can email me at this Pedro de Perdigão Lana @gmail.com. And any doubts, any inquiries, any information you need, we will be open to answer it. So we also have an annex here with places where you can learn about internet governance. There are a lot of links, a lot of guides, there are some books, some places to go after research to use as secondary sources. And there's an example of model wiki articles that we found some very good examples on how wiki page should be constructed, and provided them in this Annex 2, so you can see what you should go as your objective when editing. So without further delay, and to the most important parts of our webinar, I'll give the floor to Alex Stinston so he can actually say how you do this kind of things, how to edit and how to actually be a part of this enormous pool of knowledge that is Wikipedia, Wikidata, and all other Wikimedia Foundation platforms. So you have the floor, Alex.
Hi, thank you so much for having us. I also want to introduce my colleague, Melissa, who can you unmute too? Are we good? Cool, excellent. Hi, So thank you so much for having us. Actually, Melissa's going to kick us off with kind of the welcome and introduction to stuff, but I will share the slides and we will dig into editing. One thing to be aware of as we do this is we are going to be spending a little bit of time like hands-on on Wikipedia. So if you have a chance, use these couple minutes to sign in and create an account. If you don't have an account, there's a little login button on the top right if you're not already logged in. And that you can sign in and create an account now while we're beginning the introduction. So over to you, Melissa.
Thank you, Alex. Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Guadalupe Huertas. It's super exciting to be with you this Sunday. First of all, congratulations on making the decision to participate in this contest. We're always super excited to learn that new people are interested in the movement and really into taking these steps to take ownership of the web. Depending on who you are and the kind of education that the experience that you've had, you can relate to some degree of this idea that sometimes we are only visitors on the web. We go online to consume information, but there are very few opportunities that you have to actually take ownership of these and be a resident in the web, make changes, add your own perspectives, add your own knowledge. And actually, in Wikipedia is a wonderful platform for that, because you're not only taking ownership of the web, but you are engaging with a service activity. Every change that you make on Wikipedia can potentially change the life of another person. You are you're improving the experience that other people have when engaging with the knowledge on the platform. You are providing new opportunities for learning for people that you have no idea, that you would probably never meet. And it's just like a very selfless act of service that you can do with that will have a direct impact on someone else's life. And finally, by engaging with Wikipedia, you are engaging in learning activities that will provide you with new skills and new knowledge that you will be able to bring with you into many other different aspects of your life, and hopefully spark that give you that spark to continue engaging in other learning opportunities throughout your life. So in the next slide, you will basically, what exactly is Wikipedia anyway? So when we're talking about Wikipedia, we refer to, next slide please, Alex, this multilingual online web-based free encyclopedia, which not only allows you to add new content, modify the content, but it encourages to do so. Right? We at Wikipedia, we want you to engage with it. We want you to change it, to edit it. And it's the largest and most popular general reference work on the internet. And this is probably not your first time thinking about Wikipedia, using Wikipedia, or just seeing it around. The Wikimedia Foundation is a nonprofit that supports Wikipedia by hosting it and hosting other free knowledge projects. And we work and support a global movement of volunteers that are making different changes on these spaces. But Wikipedia, by being this platform, this encyclopedia where anyone can edit, doesn't mean that everything goes. It's not just like a wild jungle where everyone comes and puts the information or the content that you have in your mind or that you feel like it. There are certain rules that you have to follow, as you will learn as you work in this contest. So in the next slide, you will see that Wikipedia actually is kind of guided by these 5 pillars. First, it's an encyclopedia. It's not a dictionary. It's not a map. It's not a news platform. There are certain criteria about the content that goes there, and it has to be notable. It has to be of encyclopedic relevance. Wikipedia, of course, is written from a neutral point of view. And that means that when you write Wikipedia, you have to write and base your writing on the facts. And you will see that We don't use these kind of adjectives that could be subjective, like, oh, this is a beautiful work of art, or this is a very, very well-known artist, unless you have a very, very strong hard piece of data to back that claim. Wikipedia, of course, is free content that anyone can use, edit, and distribute. If you wanted to create an educational app and you need content about, let's say, the geography of Peru, which is my country and where I'm based on, you can go to Wikipedia, download all of the content about Peru that you can find in the encyclopedia and use it for free to create your own app. And even if you want to sell it, you could also do it. And of course, Wikipedia is a platform where people from all different kinds of socio-cultural and economic backgrounds come meet, and you will engage with other people there. So always keep in mind to treat the other person with respect and with civility. Finally, all of these rules are not firm rules. There's nothing on Wikipedia that will be permanent. Something that is beautiful about Wikipedia is that it is always changing. And the people that shape it are people like you and me who dare to go, be bold, and modify it and express their voices. In the next slide, you will see also that there are a couple of policies that are not just, like I said, like all of these policies and all of these rules come as a product of a consensus among the different people that participate on Wikipedia. The two policies that we want you to keep in mind, particularly, because there are many, many others, are notability. And this means that whatever you write about has to appear on significant independent sources. And like I was mentioning, it has to have an encyclopedic relevance. And finally, all of these, and the second is verifiability. All of the sources that you use have to be reliable in order for you to include them in the encyclopedia. And what do we mean by reliable sources? Just a few pointers is that a source cannot contain original research. So you have to point to existing opinions about a topic, about the content. And again, the neutral point of view is very, very important. You will not be writing your opinions on Wikipedia. You can summarize the key points, but they have to be validated by, like I said, hard data that is verifiable on external sources out of Wikipedia. So yeah, so this is just a very brief overview of the different guidelines that will be helpful for you as you engage in this contest. And I will pass the mic back to Alex now to explain a little bit more of the actual practical aspects of editing Wikipedia. While he does that, please, if you have any questions or any thoughts, any doubts, feel free to type your questions in the chat. And then at the end of Alex's presentation, we will have a moment for us to discuss some questions and provide answers to the questions that you have. And if you have questions in Spanish as well, please feel free to type in Spanish. I can translate that. And yeah, Alex, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Melissa. It's so great to have your introduction. Melissa didn't add the little bit of context. She works with our education team and is constantly thinking about how youth can stay engaged on Wikimedia platforms. And so it's so good to have you kind of introducing the stuff. Hi, I'm Alex Stinston. I am originally from the United States, but I live in Uruguay. And I am going to show you a little bit of the practicalities of editing. So as Melissa pointed out, these policies, notability, verifiability, no original research, neutral point of view, are kind of anchor policies that exist on most Wikipedias. But something really important to remember is there are over 300 Wikipedias, and each of them has their own community and consensus, and they often kind of work slightly differently. So fortunately, the languages we're working in, French, Spanish, English, and Portuguese, are mostly similar in this respect, but the cultural differences still exist, how they interpret these and how they use these. For example, on English Wikipedia, the neutral point of view policy is not strictly just like the language part of like neutrality. Like you're not going to express an opinion like the world needs to act now on climate change or there will be horror, right? This is a true statement, but we might not say it that way. We instead might frame it something like, according to scientists, climate change is going to do terrible things, which is true. But it's framed differently with that kind of summarizing of expert opinions and trying to create balance across those. So I'm going to show you how to edit. I also have the various steps in the slide deck that I shared in the chat. So you can like follow a visual guide to the editing, but I find it's actually easier to show people how to edit in the interface itself. So if you haven't logged in, this is the screen that you will get. And Melissa, how's my screen size and font size? Do I need to go bigger?
I think it's fine.
Okay, cool. So you'll notice I have a few custom interface things turned on because I'm an experienced editor and I edit a lot. You might not have these little bits in the top between the title and the text. Don't worry about that. Ignore it. That's Alex using his interface. But everything else should be very similar. So I edit a lot about climate change, and I thought this was a very relevant topic for youth because the internet is the platform for organizing for youth on climate change. So kind of something I'm interested in. And if I were to want to edit this page, there's a bunch of little edit buttons in the interface, and most of the time you'll have either edit or edit source up here in the top right. If you're in Spanish, it might be like editar or right? Is that the word? That's usually, yeah. Portuguese or French, you might have a slightly different interface concept, but it should say something like edit. And if you click on it, you might have this interface, or you might have an interface that looks like this, which is a block of code that is really scary. The way you change between these interfaces is you go up to the little pencil in the top right and you click visual edit. I'm going to teach you how to visually edit. If you're comfortable with like HTML or other markup, you might like the editing the source, but it's really not necessary. What you see, what you get editor works just fine. And there are a couple kind of main activities that you do while editing Wikipedia. First, you might want to like bold something. This works like you would in any other document tool where you just highlight and then you come up and you click the kind of bolding icon, or you can use your like familiar shortcuts that you might have in a word processor. Or we might want to do something like say like create a new section. To create a new section, so this paragraph talks about like health impact of the environmental impact on children. So I might say like impact on health. And Wikipedia is, if you've never looked at the structure of a Wikipedia article, the introduction summarizes the whole article, and each section should have topics that are prominent within within each section. So for example, there's a number of sources that talk about the high level impact on children, health and well-being of these impacts, the environmental issues that might affect people's health. So environmental impact on health, and et cetera, or it should probably like environmental change on health. Now, if I decided, you know, this really ought to be a subsection, I could highlight it, go up here to the little drop-down menu, and it'll say, oh yeah, this is a new section. I choose a heading. Main headings are heading level 2, and it's a control 2 is the shortcut. And subheadings are heading level 3, and that's control 3. These little edits are kind of useful for folks. And every time you make an edit or you make a change, you want to make sure you save it, because it's easy to like click away and click X out and go, oh, nope. That's, you know, I made a mistake, I accidentally closed the tab, and you don't want to lose these changes. So many small edits makes everyone's life easier. And so you might say, I added a new section header. Now what this is called is the edit summary, this little section that I'm filling in right now. And edit summaries are a mode of communication. They tell other editors on Wikipedia, I know what I'm doing. I have an intention, I want to make a change, and I know how to communicate what that change is. You might say something like, I added a new section header. You might say, I added a new reference. Or you might do something like copy edit. I improved the language. This kind of intentionality helps people, other editors, make sure that you're doing something from good faith. So I might make a save, and I'll go like that. And voila, I've just edited Wikipedia. Permanent change to the page. Well, what if I'm like, no, I'm not sure if that change is very good, or what if someone else feels like I did something wrong? Well, they can see in this tab called View History, and it's going to be slightly different in different languages. They can see each and every edit that's made. So I can look here and go, oh, what did this like user sad ads, which is my volunteer account, what did this user sad ads just do to the page? And there's a visual and a wiki text interface. And if you don't have the visual interface, that's fine. You might also see the wiki text interface, but you can see, oh, the other editor can look and say, they added a section header. That's not a big deal. I can ignore them. They're probably doing something fine. Or if I disagree, if I'm like, no, that's a bad section header, I can go in and edit afterwards. I'm going to disagree with my own edit and show you just how easy it is to undo a mistake on Wikipedia. This is why you can make mistakes. You're allowed to make mistakes. This is the whole point of editing an open encyclopedia. So I'm just going to click undo, and then I'm going to say undoing demonstration edit. See, I know what I'm doing. I'm not just silly like making small edits and removing things. That's not fine. So those are all the basic like formatting edits that you might do. And these kinds of things, if that's kind of where you want to start, I recommend doing small edits like this, reading pages and being like, nah, I think it needs another section, or maybe like moving a paragraph. But as you do research, which is the focus of this contest, you're going to want to add information. And this is where kind of knowing Wikipedia's policy about verifiability and neutral point of view is really important. As Melissa said, everything should come from a source out there in the world that has kind of a expert, is known for high quality information. This might be a magazine or an academic journal or a nonprofit that's known to publish high quality research, or it might be a newspaper, something with a high standard for editorial practice, producing something of quality. An example might be like a report from UNICEF. This report released by UNICEF about 4 months ago says, participation, education, digital access, and climate change are key concerns for children and young people in Africa and Europe. In regards to political decision-making related to climate change. I can scan this report and there's a lot of facts in there, but that's a pretty good high-level takeaway. In all forms, people in the high-burden disease. Well, what the beginning of this article doesn't say is that children are big stakeholders in decision-making about climate change. It's about their futures. And so I might add a sentence, while children are often the most affected by climate change, many youth, a poll by UNICEF found that children and other youth also want to feel empowered in the governance process for addressing climate change. So that's a summary of what's going on in that source from UNICEF. And this is what we mean by summary style or neutral point of view. We're not just copying the language that the source uses. If we did that, that would be plagiarism. Or also for Wikipedia, Melissa talked about how we can distribute Wikipedia all over the place. It would also be a copyright violation, and those of you who are internet governance wonks, so you're probably familiar with what copyright means, right? But it would also mean that we haven't asked permission of this other publisher to copy this thing, and so we might run into trouble. So what you might do is you take the source and you can try to click the cite button. Now, this is how we add references on Wikipedia. As you go up here, you click cite, and you try to use the automatic generator of citation tools. And it might produce an okay citation, right? And if it does, you click insert, and voila, you've just created a citation on Wikipedia. This used to be much harder. And so it's a really exciting, simple way to get started. And every time you add a reference, like a different reference, you can do that. If you want to reuse a reference, say the same piece of information or that same source might be useful for this like this lower section about global governance, I can simply come up here and click cite. I can choose the reuse button. I can search for the source I just added, and then I can click there. Now what happens, and I'm going to remove that because I don't think that source supports that statement. Now what happens if the cite tool doesn't work for you? You can also click cite, go to manual, and pick the citation format that is most similar to the type of source you're looking for. In this case, it would be a website. And you can simply drop the URL, copy the title into the field, and try as best you can to fill out each and every one of these fields. Why do you fill out these fields? So Wikipedia is based on this reliable sources and summarizing existing opinions about topics. And so you want to make it really transparent to readers and other editors exactly how to find that information. And the best way to find information is a citation. Citations give you a series of breadcrumbs that tell you, oh, you know, the title of the work was this, the URL I used was this. The date of publication was this. And why do we need these pieces of information if you can just click on a URL? Well, what if UNICEF decides to overhaul their website and they remove this press release or they move it somewhere else? We need to know exactly where we might look to somewhere like Internet Archive or some other kind of repository or archive of websites in order to pull that source so that a future editor or reader can verify that information. That this is the concept of verifiability. So again, you can see I added a similar citation as was made automatically. And you'll see that I use slightly different fields. You can edit citations if you're like, oh yeah, they're missing a field somewhere. Like the automatic citation doesn't have the source date. And so I want to add that. And so once you've summarized something, added a citation, of course you want to save. I remember every time you add like a paragraph or a section, you do that. So adding a source about the need to empower youth. And I might clean up and edit this. This might not be the right place in the Wikipedia article. That's fine. Some other editor can be like, oh, you know, I like that paragraph, but maybe we move it down to something like this. So I can go just edit and move. And it actually probably belongs in this. Addressing climate challenges. And you can see where like I kind of disagree with the last editor on how that the section header was framed. And so I made a few edits. I moved that paragraph down. So I might say move paragraph down after clicking publish change. I added summary. And now every other editor who's ever edited this page, who's concerned about this thing, can see exactly these 4 edits I did over the course of the page. They can also compare these differences. And you can see kind of what the changes look like. I added and removed a section header. I changed the name. I added a paragraph. Those are the main things you do when editing Wikipedia. And I invite you to think not necessarily about just adding large volumes of content, but what can you do to modify the existing page to make it more accurate, more clear, and better for the public? And while you're doing it, add as many sources as you can. So this is the basics of editing a Wikipedia article. And as you find Wikipedia articles, this is kind of the cycle of things you do. For example, you might go to the internet governance article and realize that there's no mention of youth in the article. And maybe there's worth adding a section there about that topic. Or you may go to something like climate change education, which is like one of the most pressing issues of our time, and think about what is the role of internet in shaping this for youth, for the public, etc. So these are the kinds of edits where you might find gaps. I'm gonna pause and again, I showed all this in the slide deck if you need it. Oh, and if you're like, I'm a little bit confused about where I might start, there's this great tool that can help you kind of start browsing gaps. So citationhunt.org. That's probably the wrong URL. Yeah, that worked. So if you're like, well, I'm not sure where to start, what you might want to do is start somewhere that you might have some interest. So say if you're interested in internet governance, this tool, what it does is it goes through and it finds all the citation needed statements on a wiki and allows you to kind of go and fix those. And these might be low hanging fruit, like good ways for you to get started. For example, like, is state-sponsored internet propaganda astroturfing? What experts have that opinion? Let's add a citation. I think I can get that, right? And you might go, I got this. And it takes you to the section of the page where that citation needed is. You can click edit, and I'm kind of walking you through the steps. What's neat is you can say, oh, yep, I think I know how to add a citation here, add a citation. And you go through that same step that I just walked you through of adding a citation to Wikipedia. So that's like one way you could imagine trying to get started. If you're like, I'm not sure what to do. Oh, thanks. Melissa did a great job adding a link to the thing. So that's my quick and dirty introduction to Wikipedia. And we have some time for questions, and I have a chance. Oops, let's not do that. And we have the chance to I can walk you through one of these edits, or kind of talk you through any other questions you have about Wikipedias.
Yeah, actually, I have collected a couple of questions already. So I think we can start with Elise. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. The question is, I've seen that sometimes the Wiki community is a bit rigid with newcomers. Can you explain to us a bit more about things we should be careful about to have our edits accepted?
Yeah, so keep your edits small. You notice how I saved multiple times with small edits. When someone comes in and just overhauls a page, it can be shocking to someone who feels like they've invested many, many hours and time into that page and like writing it correctly. So one of the first steps is like, keep your edits small, try to add things incrementally, always have a source, always have an edit summary. These kinds of things, especially for newcomers, are just signals of participation. It's like, I know what the community is asking of me, and I'm trying to like keep doing it with the community. If you run into a problem, depending on the language, like someone like Melissa or I might be able to help. I'm on Twitter at SADADS, and people frequently reach out to me about stuff. And I know that Pedro and team have some connections to the Wiki community as well. So we may be able to give you kind of a little bit of like mentoring or side support. And Pedro, I don't know, do you have a chat channel going in the background for folks?
We are actually providing our email, and if there are doubts that are a little bit more complex, we are passing them to comedians that could help a little bit better than us, because we are also newbies in this whole Wikimedia ecosystem. So that's, people can ask anything they want. People can ask for small guides in every language, and we'll try our best to provide the answers in the most complete manners to them.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when in doubt, or when you feel like you might not understand what's going on, ask a question. It's most of the time, when a editor is responding poorly to a newbie, it's because the other editor is feeling rushed, or isn't communicating well. Or maybe the other editor is interpreting the rules or policies wrong. This happens a lot. There's a lot of kind of newish editors who sometimes will bite the newbies because they think they've learned something, but they haven't yet figured it out. So you might be almost as much as the other person who's responding to you, but it's hard to know.
Yeah, and also don't get discouraged if the changes that you made get reversed or somebody doesn't agree with it. It's just part of the experience. There's another question. Well, there was another question that I think you already answered, but Marcelina was wondering about the referencing style used for editing. And as you demonstrated, it's basically automated, that process of adding the references.
Yeah, and for Spanish, French, Portuguese, and English, this is what the automated referencing style is well supported. So you shouldn't run into too many problems. What you'll notice, and you can still see my editing interface, right? So what you'll notice is when you click the Cite tool, you have these 4 options. So web is for anything digital that's not a like formally published source. Just go ahead and use that, even if it's you're like, well, this is kind of like, you know, a press release or a report by a nonprofit or something. Use web for right now. That's the kind of best option you have. If it's more like a book, you'll find the book field has all of those like fields you would expect from a citation style in another format. So like I was trained in history and English in the United States, and so I learned like Chicago style, which has like periods and italics and, you know, this and that, or MLA, Modern Language Association, which has no URLs in it, which when you're a digital scholar is terrible. So these things, you don't have to worry about that. Wikipedia wants all of your data fields. And if you're like, I want to add a field that I normally would use in another citation environment, try this little search field at the bottom, add more information, and be like, okay, yeah, like I need a URL or I want a chapter. The only fields that are shown automatically here are the like main ones that are preferred. And then all the other ones are optional that just, like I was saying earlier, add that little trail of evidence of where you found that information.
Cool. Yeah, those are the only questions for now. So I think we can continue, or maybe if somebody else has a new question or something else that they want to add, please feel free to do it via the chat.
Yeah, we'll give everyone a moment.
I actually have one as a guide, so people can know what to edit. I would like to ask you both, what do you think would be the best ways to search for articles where their contributions would be more interesting or valid, more accepted? How could one identify an article that needs improvement?
So it depends a lot on the wiki, which is not a very helpful answer. I think the citation hunt tool is a really good way to like look for the backlog and find things in the backlog. There are other backlog tools for different language wikis. For example, if you're editing in English, there's this tool called Bambot that tells us, so I'll drop a link to that here. which has a whole bunch of wiki projects, which are like how the community organize themselves. And I think there's one for internet. Oh no, there's not. Web. Well, that's not going to be very helpful for this group. So that could be one way, but you're not gonna find it. I didn't do a lot of digging because I didn't realize I was training for this till very late. Pedro asked us for help because his other trainer had to back out, unfortunately. And we're really grateful, happy to be here. But it's I didn't get the normal prep time. But you might look, for example, in this category of stubs on English, and it looks like that same category exists in French. The stubs is what we call like a short article. But you'll often find that these are kind of like boring, small, not very interesting articles. And so the other way to kind of start is go to an article like Internet Governance and look for links to things. These top level articles are sometimes very hard to edit. Like I personally would have a hard time researching and writing about internet governance, but I might have a really easy time writing about the Commission on Science and Technology for Development, for example, because this is a proper noun concept that doesn't have a lot of references on it. So I'll drop this in here. And the article says it needs additional verification. So like someone hasn't looked at the article in a while. And what I'm looking for in an article that's like easy for a newcomer to work from is it's kind of short. Like this is just like a list of members and like a couple paragraphs. And the sections aren't very robust. There's not a lot of references. And there's kind of an opportunity for sections. And so for an article like this, I might search the title of the thing and then go digging. And usually you would add like 3 or 4 sections, like I could imagine for this one. A history section, kind of a list of treaties or other activities that this organization is involved in, some information about the Secretariat, maybe the role of youth or underrepresented groups in the Commission. And there's these kinds of proper noun things are a good place to start. Note, try not to edit about things you are a member or employee of. This is a conflict of interest, and it's important that folks don't when you have a conflict of interest, when you're very closely related to a subject, it's easy for your relationship to alter how you cover the article and alter your neutral point of view. So we just recommend that you don't do that. Could get you into trouble.
Yeah, just one more tool that I wanted to share that I find very helpful for me. I enjoy translating articles. So there's a gap finder tool, which I put on the link on the chat. Maybe Alex, can you show how to use that tool, please?
Yeah. So if you're multilingual and you're interested in translation, it's pretty easy to use. What you can do is you can choose the languages you want to go. So like I'm not an English to Spanish person, I'm more of a Spanish to English person. So I might do governance. I'm not spelling that. Let's just do internet. You pick an article that's kind of central to the topic area you're interested in. You click on it, and what it does is it introduces articles that are kind of somewhere in the space. And you might find, for example, communication via satellite, right? Kind of, sort of rough translation of that. And you might be like, oh, this is something I could totally do. Now, the problem is you can click on the translation tool, and what it'll do is open an interface that makes it easy to translate. Unfortunately, it's very hard to publish into English as a newcomer on the translation, so I don't recommend doing that. It's much easier to go from English to Spanish or French or Portuguese as a newcomer, and you can do that. And what you do is you go in and you click Start a Translation, and you can simply start working through the title. So like communications via satellite, for example. And then it has little tools that can help with automatic translation, except when you're going into English, because the English Wikipedia community is a pain about translation. So that is there. Melissa, do you know if there's any limitations on like publishing in Spanish?
No,
from
I
translation?
don't know what that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't have to. Yeah, you don't have to publish it using the translate tool. It can just give you, if you just stay on the gap finder tool, it will give you the links to the articles that you can start working on in the main space. You don't have to use the content translation tool. Alex, there's one new question from Gus or Goose. Sorry about the names. And the question is it okay for a new editor to create new pages, which I think you mean you're referring to the articles, with local information about internet governance, like a specific public policy being implemented, considering if there is no conflict of interest?
So I recommend, actually, this is a good category of topics for folks to dig into. There's all these articles on internet by country. So let me drop so this is the category that you might find the articles for. And you'll see that there's like internet in Kyrgyzstan, internet in Russia, telecommunications in Kyrgyzstan. These by country articles, especially for countries that are not in the language that the Wikipedia is, so like Paraguay, right? There's no article by internet in Paraguay. Let me see if I can. Internet in Bahrain. So like English is not a dominant language in Bahrain. And so there's probably a lot of information about governance that could be added to this article. That would be a good first place to start. I would be very reluctant to recommend a newcomer create a new article about internet governance in Bahrain, because the like overlap between this article and that article would be quite high. And as you can see, I have this tool enabled that allows me to see the page views. In the last 3 days, there's only been 200 page views to this article. So it's actually better to improve and update this article, which probably hasn't, like last time it was updated about internet users was 2010, or maybe 2015, right? So there's already just like high level out of date stuff. And so this internet by country space is probably the best place to start. If there's not an internet in your country article, so we saw that was true of Paraguay, we might start with the telecommunications in Paraguay. And you'll notice that this article is very neglected, right? Like the internet section just has some key stats. Who controls the internet? Does their government spend any money on infrastructure? Do we know anything about, blocking or censorship? Have any of those things happened, right? Like this is totally an article that someone should go rewrite. And so these are the kinds of articles that are like good for gap finding, right? Whereas like internet, so I live in Uruguay, is probably, oh yeah, same thing happened. So telecommunications in Uruguay is where it is, and this is not fair. Like the government has a ton of things that it's spent here on.
Abdullah, you can check the internet in Pakistan one.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm like monologuing about content gaps here. Yeah, so this article, like this introduction section is too short. I can tell you that right now. There's a couple citation neededs, and like this paragraph needs to be broken up and actually turned into something that humans can read. The this section is probably too long, so you probably want to break it up and rethink the structure of the broadband section. There's only one citation in right-of-way draft rules. I don't know if that's a top-level header, or is that just like one set of headers on infrastructure. E-government is not the same as e-commerce. There's probably a section there. A one-sentence paragraph on web posting in Pakistan. Like, all of these things could be improved. And that's just like me scanning it in like 5 seconds. And you'll see too, like, some of the sources are just like the government and stuff, right? Which, you know, if I know anything about the kind of broader MENA region, a scholarship about governance of the internet and countries, and like South Asia, both of those regions, which Pakistan straddles, right? There's probably tons of other expert opinions about these things that should be there.
Cool. I just want to be mindful of the time.
Yes.
I know that we have limited time today, so maybe we can continue with the next topic. So now we will look more closely at Wikidata or Wikidata. I never know how to pronounce it. But if you have other questions or some more things come up about Wikipedia, please continue to feel free to share them in the chat. And as Alex explains Wikidata as well, also just leave your questions there.
Yeah, and we can, yeah, cool. So Wikidata, what is it? So you probably know Wikipedia. You've probably read Wikipedia or been told by a teacher not to use Wikipedia. This is totally like, you've had interactions with Wikipedia if you're on the internet on a regular basis. You probably don't know much about Wikidata, and this is just a bet. So I'm gonna start, instead of starting from like how to edit Wikidata, I'm gonna start, what is it? Why do we have it? Because it's sometimes hard to wrap your head around it if you don't have that question of like, how, like, we're not going to the mechanics yet. We're just gonna, why? So you are lucky. Wikidata is a marvelous platform. It's doing wonderful things. It's making the internet better for all of you users on the internet, especially those of you who are multilingual. You probably don't know how it's doing it. And I'm going to describe like where it what problem it was solving first. So we had this problem, and this is a very art history example of this. But we had this problem on Wikipedias where each language Wikipedia in projects like Wikimedia Commons, which is our media repository, were replicating the same information over and over and over and over again. And so in order for someone to say like edit about Joseph Wright, and if they discovered that, say, his birth date was wrong, or his residence, or his wife, or whoever, was like that information was important, the editor would have to, 10 years ago, before Wikidata, have to go across all 30 Wikipedias that that person was described in and fix that data, and let's go incrementally. And so we needed a way for users of different languages to figure out how to update each other's information in a really organic, supportive way. This is really important when, for example, we'll use the example of Pakistan. Say a new mayor gets elected in a town in Pakistan. Like the major cities like Islamabad, which I believe is the capital, correct me if I'm wrong, like that is likely to get international press coverage. And so like Russian Wikipedia or English or Spanish will likely update who the mayor is of that quite easily. But if we went to a smaller community or a smaller town or city, that election probably is only covered in local languages like Urdu. And so the chance, and so our editors who speak that local language probably are going to update that piece of data, like the mayor of the city is this. And they might update languages that they're familiar with, like English, or if they happen to be bilingual, like one of the Punjabi languages or Arabic or something like that, right? Like a language that's close to the cultural context in which they're operating. But Czech Wikipedia or Russian Wikipedia or French Wikipedia would not get updated. And so what was happening is we'd have data that was wildly inconsistent depending on the cultural context you're operating in. And so we needed a solution for this. And this is the solution that we landed on was called linked structured open data. This is a very technical concept, but basically we needed a system that humans and machines, so computers, could edit that didn't care about language, but also would allow us to translate concepts and key facts and data across all of the languages we support on Wikimedia projects, which is over 300. We needed something that was both reliable, like Wikipedia, that had this referenced information, but wasn't just like a big like pool of anonymous information somewhere. It needed to be humans could edit it, and machines, and all of the parts in between. This is what Wikidata is. What do I mean by link structured data? That's kind of complicated. We wanted to describe items, so things like internet governance, or the science fiction author Douglas Adams, or San Diego, or Islamabad, or Cabbage, or King, with characteristics, like we would call them properties on Wikidata, that have values, right? So say the author Douglas Adams was male. He was born on a specific date. Bangladesh is extremely vulnerable to climate change. Like those might be relationships between a page like Bangladesh and climate change. We might want to create some relationship, and that's a property. Together, this three-part item, property, value is a statement. What do I mean by a triple and a statement? So every item, and this is a bit abstract, but I'm going to zoom in really quick into a practical in a moment. Every item is described by a bunch of statements, triples, item, property, value, that describe what that item is. And so let me give you some examples of these statements, and then I'll show you what they look like in Wikidata itself. So for example, Earth has highest point, Mount Everest. Mount Everest has elevation above sea level, 8,848 meters. Earth has the deepest point, Challenger Deep. You'll notice how I'm talking about these in triples. Earth, there's a property, item, property, value. And it's kind of like a sentence. It's like a simple sentence that anyone can read. Challenger Deep has elevation above sea level. But you have to remember the goal of this kind of communication, right, is for humans and machines to both do it, and not just English speakers like me, right? Like this is already on English Wikipedia. That's great. But what if I am interested in Urdu or Malayalam or Tagalog or any of these other number of smaller languages? Well, first, we need to kind of structure it in some way so that these relationships are really routine. So Earth, the item, has multiple relationships to other things like highest point or deepest point. Challenger Deep has elevation above sea level. And this structuring allows us to start to do relationships between different items. So Earth is an item, Mount Everest is an item, Challenger Deep is an item, and we can start to see this logical relationship, but this does nothing for other speakers or computers. So what we do is we add a unique ID. This Q2, so Earth, Q2, has property. P, so every time you see a P number, that's a property. P610. Mount Everest is the other item. This is a triple. This is a relationship. Earth has highest point, Mount Everest. What we need to do is stop being squishy humans and just communicate to the computer, hey, Q2, P610, Q513. If we're a computer, that's all we need. But if we're a human, we need these labels. And so that's kind of how Wikidata works, is it's creating relationships between items like Q2, P610, etc., but making it intelligible for machines. And then we're adding things, and it's called a label, in different languages like English, Earth, Mount Everest, so that me as a human can understand it. Now, if we use these numbers because, say, for example, you had a relationship to London, like someone was born in London. There are many Londons. There's a London in Canada, there's a London in Kansas, there's a London everywhere. Now, as human speakers, we have all of this contextual knowledge, but the Q numbers allow us to be exactly precise. It's like, no, London is this Q number, it's this thing. So I hope this makes sense to folks as like a basic introduction. You're now going to see it in the interface, right? So this is, well, we'll start with, so let's go to, oh yeah. So state-sponsored internet propaganda. Say you're in Wikipedia and you're like, how do I find this Wikidata thing, this magical thing that sits in the back that like gives relationships to things? Over here on the left, in your tools box on Wikipedia, you will find Wikidata item. That takes you to this weird, funky page that has a Q number, and it has Q, and it has this little box that's labeled with labels and descriptions, and it has statements. This only has one statement, but you'll also see it has relationships. It describes, other Wikipedia articles about this. What we want to do, if we are looking at Wikidata, is we want to understand, okay, what is going on this page? For example, this item, Q161354550. What is this Q161354550? For a computer, that's great. It's like totally useful. But for humans, we need to make it readable. So we might call it state-sponsored internet sock puppetry, right? This is so I guess I will dig into that in a moment. This is one way of labeling it, but what we'll notice is English Wikipedia also had another way of labeling it. There are multiple concepts that are kind of very similar that normal humans would put together. So that's why we have labels. This concept, Q135450, is sometimes known as state-sponsored internet sock puppetry. Sorry, let me make sure I'm logged in real quick. I did not log in. Oh, and you can log in with your Wikipedia account on this page. It should, if you're logged in Wikipedia, it should most of the time work. So there are multiple ways of describing it. That's what we use this little box at the top for. This box allows you to say state-sponsored internet sock puppetry has multiple ways of being described. One of them is state-sponsored internet propaganda. And then we might want to give like other humans a way to distinguish between this state-sponsored internet sock puppetry and the academic article by Joe Smo in the Internet Governance Review called state-sponsored internet sock puppetry. So this is the, we're going to describe it as a act of a government or state to manipulate the internet. And so that's what these fields are for up here. So label is like, let's give human squishy interface for state-sponsored internet sock puppetry. Active governance is like, this tells other humans what this is about, and etc. Once I do that, once I write or translate these things, you can click publish. And you'll notice that these things are in the interface. Now, is there a good term for this, Melissa, in Spanish?
I had no idea. Maybe somebody else in the chat could help us. I can think like títere, like, yeah, no idea.
So if we figured out exactly what we would want to call this in Spanish, we might also add a label in Spanish. Why would we do this? Because if I switch my language in the interface, that whole state-sponsored internet publishing is like that. There's no Spanish. As a Spanish reader, this would not be useful. We do have an article in Portuguese, so we might put a label like that in Portuguese. But for example, let me go to a better article that has more information in it. Okay, so internet in Pakistan. So you'll notice I'm in Spanish right now, and it's still called Internet in Pakistan. But you'll notice that the interface has automatically translated because we're using Q numbers. So Q16151135 has a relationship instance of Q7481767. But it's being translated in Spanish. So it'd be Internet in Pakistan, instancia de aspecto en una región geográfica. See? And if I went back to the English interface, you'll notice that it automatically translated it. That's because there are labels on some of these items. So Internet in Pakistan is an instance of aspect of geography, and we will notice that aspect of geography has been translated into many languages in the interface.
Sorry, yeah. Alex, just a quick pause. Can you show how to edit in more languages than the ones that are immediately shown there?
Yeah. So if you're not seeing the languages you want, you can go to Preferences. You can go to, I think it's Editing. Yeah, Editing. And then you can drop the languages that you're most interested in there. I was using Swahili as an example, but this is the two-letter ISO code for your language. You can find that by going to the Wikipedia article about that language, and it should be in the info box on the right. And then if you modify it, make sure that you click Save in your preferences.
Cool, thank you.
Yep. So back to internet in Pakistan. So you remember I was talking about triples? Here's a good example of a triple. Q161511135, P31, instance of is P31, Q7481767. Why do we need these kinds of triples? Because this kind of three-part thing is very easy for computers to understand. And I have a special interface tool, so you're not going to see this. But we can go find other aspects of geography using a query language called Sparkle, and say, okay, what other aspects are there? There's media of Austria, there's cuisine in the Americas. Obviously, this isn't a very useful set, but it could be if we change some of these properties. For example, I might say, you know, instance of is aspect of geography isn't enough. It's internet by country, and there's no item for it. Then I would have to create a new item. I'm not going to show you how to do that because that's kind of a next level user skill. But that would be the kind of relationship you're looking for. When you're looking at something, and so I'm going to go back to the question up here. So internet governance. So if we go to this article about internet governance, again, you'll see all the translations, and I might add another label like governance of the internet, because like other humans might look for that concept. And you'll notice that there are not many statements: commons category, topics main category. But what I do know is this is actually a subclass of governance. So I know internet governance is type of governance, and that's what subclass is. And so if I wanted to add a statement, I could add something like subclass of governance, and then click and add publish. For like common sense things like this, and this is related to the question, you just need to add a statement. But if you were to add something like governed by, so the authority on internet governance is Internet Governance Forum, right? If I wanted to say that was authority, I would have to add a reference. The fields for references are like, if you type something like URL, you might use that, and I might go find a source. So Internet Governance Forum. But we don't have the nice fancy we don't have the nice fancy interface for references here. So you kind of have to manually add it. But as you add things, it'll kind of suggest that when you got it. So like we retrieved it on 5/16, 2021. And you see that it interprets my thing. So I'm very American. I'm using an American order date, but it's totally kind of adapting and saying, oh, no, the system recognizes this as May 16. And so I click that, and what it does is that modifies that data into the universal time so that it's useful. Each type of field, so like retrieved expects a date, so it kind of checks in with you and formats the date. If I had this expects a URL, and the publisher field might expect Internet Governance Forum itself, the organization, publish that, and you might add fields like that. The thing about editing Wikidata, and so I did subclass of authority of. What's neat about this is now that I've made these edits, and sorry, I have some internet interface features on. Now I could go to a completely another language, right? So let's do Francais. You would have all those fields translated that would, yeah, Internet Archive links are good. You would call that an archive URL. You wouldn't call it an original URL. So in the field here, so you saw how I had fields. So if I modified this URL, the archive, no, URL archive. So you would drop it in that field if you did that. But you'll notice that the whole interface has been translated because these fields have been translated. So governance de Internet, sus, and you notice I edited in English, but the results in French, right? Sus de classe, governance, autorité, mi français son horrible. That was partially in Spanish. But like, you'll notice that all of these things that kind of the relationships are what you're describing in Wikidata, but the result is multilingual content that can be used anywhere. And what this means is that Wikidata has an outsized influence on things like Google results. So those little knowledge graphs on the right, often a lot of that data is coming from Wikidata, even if it says Wikipedia. Yeah, you can use paywalled and logged in sources. Try to find a unique URL. So the best examples of this are like the New York Times or things like Elsevier published scholarly source material. Try to use a unique URL that's permanent and consistent. We are not, so this is where the Wikimedia movement, it prefers open sources, but it doesn't put barriers up for stuff. Part of the reason for this is like some of the best sources of knowledge are books, which are inherently limited in their access for that stuff. Editing Wikidata can require a little bit of getting your hands dirty. Try what you can, and if you and like you saw with this internet governance article, you kind of start with the things you think are appropriate, and the little drop downs kind of sometimes help you. So like most Wikidata items have instance of, country, etc. But you know, like instance of, like what is governance? Is governance a internet governance? I don't know what it is. So if you don't know what it is, don't use it. And I think that was the earlier question too. Oh, and you'll notice there are two types of statements. There are these descriptive statements. So what is internet governance? Q163452 is a subclass of P279 governance. But we also have these other identifiers. There's other kind of sources of authority other than Wikidata. And that includes like Freebase, Microsoft Academic, Quora. I'm sure there's an Elsevier ID somewhere. So these are two different types of things. So other IDs are like places where this topic is described, whereas these fields are used to describe, the statements are used to describe what exactly is this, so that humans and computers can agree on what we're looking at. What is the topic we're looking at? Any other questions about Wikidata? How did I do, Melissa? Sorry.
Yeah, I think we're reaching the allocated time, but I think there's you touched upon all of the questions that were coming up in the chat. Maybe do you want to go back to addressing more details from Gus's question regarding what is it, censorship, debatable point of, how should I address a debatable point of view in an article? I'm afraid of spending time editing an information, and this work end up being perceived as a conflict of interest.
Yeah, so on Wikipedia, the way we handle this, so is the question's like different on different places. Let's look at internet censorship in Russia. So the best way to do it on Wikipedia is to find the appropriate section, and what we try to do is summarize each of the major opinions on I have a little bit of time for Q&A if we're good. So what you try to do is you summarize all the major opinions on a subject, right? What is a major opinion? It's an opinion that exists consistently in reliable sources, right? So like a not reliable source might be a Russian state-sponsored source of news, right? Like Russia, what's the RTN, the news network, like says there is no censorship of Russia, internet in Russia. Well, we actually, like all the scholars probably know that there is some. And so like that position from the federal government might be framed like, state-sponsored media source says X, but the vast majority of opinions by scholars or experts says Y, right? That would be the best way to frame it. You do not need to represent opinions that are fringe. For example, I know, or just widely discredited by experts. A good example of this is during the COVID pandemic. There's a lot of information about cures for COVID that make no sense. So I saw some reporting from like using cow's milk in India recently. There's a kind of a viral misinformation campaign going on where, or not campaign, like circulating on WhatsApps and whatnot, that like, oh, we can solve X, Y, and Z in this way. If that is not a major opinion, you do not need to represent it, and the community will often push back. Or if there's a lot of misinformation about something or a lot of adverse opinions, we might fork it into another page. So we have this page about misinformation about COVID-19, and there's a COVID cures. For things that are like legitimate disputes, you might have all of those opinions represented in different ways. So a good example of this is so I recommend not going to disputes that are very actively challenging. For example, there's a lot of what name do you use for say some of the towns or some of the cities in India? Do you use the colonial name? Do you use the modern Indian name? On English Wikipedia, the consensus is you would use the modern name. and only refer to the colonial name as historical, but in some contexts that kind of naming is disputed. For example, in Poland, I believe, there's a couple cities where like the Russian or Soviet name is dominantly used outside of that country, but is not at all acceptable inside. And so there's a lot of like heavy dispute. And so different pages might prevent you because of that. I usually talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict as having lots of problems, but I think that's entirely inappropriate at the moment. It's the news is very challenging at the moment. Yeah, Abdullah, you have a question?
It might be a floating hand.
Yeah, I have a question.
Oh,
okay, great.
Okay, sorry, I just, first of all, I joined a bit late, so I just missed the start the portion. First of all, I introduce myself. I'm speaking from Pakistan right now, and by profession, I teach computer science. Before pandemic, I teach at school level, but after this lockdown, third wave in Pakistan, now I start teaching at university level. I done in master's in computer science, and currently I am working with ISOC chapter Islamabad. Apart from that thing, I am more interested to do these contribution on Wikipedia as by passion. You can say I am a born volunteer. I work with Red Crescent Society, International Society from last 4 and 5 years, but this is a very new thing for me as well. So my question is this: like as a newbie person, what are the 1, 2, 3, 4 steps to start, you can say, editing or to start contributing on the Wikipedia or a Wiki data? Because I see there are some, you can say there are some technical things as well, like you open an HTML editor and I can understand those things as well. And you talk about the, you can say the coding stuff is about the latex and the creating the semantics. So I can understand the technical details as well. So my question, I rephrase my question. I just want to know the 1, 2, 3, 4 steps so I can start my journey as a contributor on the Wikipedia.
Well, so I'll kind of review what we talked about earlier. Edit. Make sure you're in the visual editor. So create an account, sign in, edit. Make sure you're in the visual editor. Look for a section you want to improve or edit. Type a summary. Do a little bit of research. Find the source. So internet in Pakistan is managed by X organization. I'm not reading a source. Click cite, drop a citation that you want to use. So I'm just going to use the one I showed as an example earlier. Click insert citation, publish change, write an edit summary, tell people adding a source. And if this was a real edit, you'd click publish change. That is the easiest way to go through it. The slide deck that we shared, which I can share again, has those steps described in it. Those tutorials that Pedro just dropped also have that information. You know, because it's an encyclopedia, anyone can edit. You kind of have to find your place to start. And we dropped some links in the sidebar that I think hopefully Pedro grab those as kind of examples of where content gaps are easy to engage in. That's where I would start. Wikipedia is kind of the very, like, it's very easy because you're summarizing sources of knowledge, right? Especially if you're just adding small little bits of content. Wikidata is a little bit harder because you have to wrap your head around the data structure. And so I hope this introduction was useful, but if you get lost, don't worry. I've been editing in the Wikimedia community for about 15 years now, and it took me, when Wikidata was first introduced to me, it took about 3 2-hour sessions before I was feeling confident that I knew what to do there.
Thank you.
And Abdullah, just also about the part of the WikiContest, you also have to create an account either on the Wikimedia page. Let me just show it here. the meta I'm talking about. Just a second, I will send the link here, or a separate one in Wikipedia and Wikidata in those two platforms. Also, after doing that, you should register here at our dashboard so your contributions appear and we can evaluate them afterwards.
Okay, fine. Just let me know. I can select any topic randomly to contribute, or you assign some topics, or there are some, you can say, main category. So I go through those topics. Just
No, you can go to any topic that you want, but it must be related to internet governance. There's a lot of subjects related to it, legal aspects, human rights in the internet, all these things that are, even if remotely related to internet governance, you can edit any subject among them. So there is a lot of freedom to edit in a great variety of subjects, but they all should be related in some way to internet governance.
fine. Currently, I am representing my chapter as well in Pakistan. So as an ISOC chapter, how I can, you can say, take this initiative to share with my community? Is there any, you can say, I'm not talking about because my limitation is, you can say, a limited person. So, but I have a voice to, you can say, to reach my all members. So how you can guide me? I share this thing to my community members. Is there any, you can say, way forward? As an GS, I'm talking about as a GS, General Secretary.
Sorry, do you mean sharing them with other members from the chapter?
Yeah.
Oh, I can send you a link of any person can participate. The registrations will be open during the whole contest. So you just have to share with them the rules, the form to register for registration, and the video that we are recording right now, so they can learn how to edit. I think all information they need to participate are in these three documents.
Fine. Okay. Thank you.
Pedro, there's a question about the languages as well.
Oh, sure. Enegit, sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but it must be in these 4 languages because the dashboard, it kind of collects automatically these contributions, and we must select what languages are available, are part of the project, and to be able to evaluate with our judges and make some small teams that are capable of getting all this info because of limitations that we have as a volunteer project. We had to channel to these 4 languages, but to those that are editing in English, since there are a lot of people that are not native speakers, they can also translate when we are talking about the eliminatory criteria of translation. They can also translate from English to their native language, and this is the only exception. You have either to participate in these 4 languages. Wikidata, as you know, you can use other languages because it's a it's a sole page with all these other options to contribute in many languages. But when we are talking about Wikipedia, it's just English, Portuguese, Spanish, and French, and the exception translating from English to your native language if you are participating in the English track but are not an English native speaker.
Okay, fine. So if I go for the translation, so is there any special guidance for me? Like if I go for the both track, I can contribute on some articles in English, and I go and translate some articles from, because I go through my native language, Urdu. So as I know, there's no much stuff in Urdu as well. So if I go for the translation, so any, you can say, specific steps do I perform?
No, I think that translation is a bit easier to do. You need to maintain the same pattern that is in the other language when referring and making citations. But you should just, the only thing that is important that you should preserve the original content, since we won't have people to evaluate in all languages. So we are just going to check if it's the same content that is in the original article, if it's the same thing you translated to another language. It's the only thing we will be able to do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you shouldn't add other elements.
Yeah, because translation is a quite, we assume translation is quite easy, but it's quite, you can say, a tricky, challenging thing, because you can say the semantics of the language is changed when you translate from the one language. Translation from the Google is not the actual meaning of the translation. Sometime in technical documents, I don't think so that it matter a lot, but when we talk about the literature point of view, translation is a quite, you can say, a heavy sort of work in linguistics. So thank you so much for your guidance.
Okay, so Alex and Melissa, do you have something else you would like to add?
No, but best of luck, everyone. It's always great to edit, and I hope this is like introduces you to the Wikimedia community.
Do we have any, you can say, WhatsApp or an instant communication channel on Telegram or WhatsApp, or we just have a, you can say, a mailing list and we communicate through mails?
We are using only the email for that. We also have internal Telegram groups. I'll see so we can create Telegram groups to all participants to participate if they want. It won't be an obligatory participation.
Because it's quite easy for, you can say, like communication. Like I missed my this meeting because I just I unable to get the notification because we are celebrating Eid in Pakistan. It's my third day of the Eid, so I'm busy with my family stuff. I just, you can say, missed the mail. So I am unable to mark in my calendar. So if you're part of some groups, so you can say the notification and the media, you can frequently check those. So that is usually go to for the instant communication, but that's fine. No issue. I start, you can say, looking on the things, and if I have any question, I go through or shoot a mail and I ask through email.
So thank you, Alex. Thank you, Melissa. We will create these Telegram groups, and this recording will be made available for our participants in its integrity. So I would also like to thank everyone that participated and got some of their time to understand about Wikimedia, Wikidata, Wikipedia. And I hope that everyone will enjoy participating in this contest and learn a lot, as that this is such a great opportunity on such an important part of the internet as a force for good in our society. So anyone else have some other comments? Anything else they would like to add? If not, we can end the transmission, stop the recording, and have a great day, everyone.